Welcome to the LaunchFamily Podcast, where we bring expert-backed guidance to real parenting moments. I'm your host, Jessica Shelley, a former teacher, mom of 6, and here to help families navigate the sometimes overwhelming systems we're all trying to make sense of. Today's guest brings the perfect blend of lived experience and system-disrupting insight. I'm joined by Antoinette Banks, an IEP advocate, founder, and mom who's turning her personal journey through the education system into a force for transparency, justice, and change. We'll talk about how schools unintentionally isolate families, why the IEP process can feel impossible to decode, and how to stop playing defense when it comes to our kids' education. Antoinette, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. What a beautiful introduction.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have been looking forward to this conversation. I know we've had another episode on the podcast where we've heard from like the educator view of IEPs and managing special education, but I'm so excited to have your perspective in and also share the work that you're doing with your company. So, can you start off by giving our listeners a little bit of context for who you are? Like, walk us through your journey, what led you to become an advocate for families and just in general in the special education system?
Well, first and foremost, I am a mother to a fabulous child that has autism and ADHD. And when she was first diagnosed, my daughter was diagnosed as severe mentally retarded with 0% probability of adult autonomy. Baby, what do you mean? Mentally retarded? Mentally retarded. And it was a time before the law had changed where you can't use or you're not supposed to use words like that in general. But it was a tough time. Definitely trying to understand that I put my trust into someone to help me with understanding things that I was noticing as a mother, and then to come back with certain language that would describe, my daughter that I birthed out of my body, you know. Like,
Yeah.
and so in that, I discovered that I had a different particular level of fight, and I needed to understand why. And I may or may not have shoved a doctor against a wall one time for using certain language. I may or may not, allegedly.
Under wraps. See, we're on a podcast, allegedly. Here we go.
Allegedly. And and from there, I just figured, like, who was anybody to say anything different than what I knew to believe, to the types of visions I had for my kid. And so I created a database for my daughter. And I felt like if anybody wanted to have our time, have our attention, to understand you, if you wanted me to sign on any document, you needed to have been logged into this database and to understand what everyone else and then mama was saying so we can get on the same page. And so I think there's a lot of families who are struggling with this type of process and this type of program. And I am as equally crazy as I am a person that believes in God at the same time. I pray a lot about it, and now I'm an award-winning cognitive scientist and an author, a recognized leader in artificial intelligence, and it really was because I'm a mom first.
Yeah. There's nothing like that fire that burns within you as a mom of like, I'm going to go to the nth degree plus some for my children to make
Yes.
sure that they're understood and that they understand too the world around us. So, in those early days when you got your daughter's diagnosis, what was it like showing up to some of those IEP meetings? It's kind of like you get the diagnosis, you got a treatment plan, and then it's like, oh gosh, then there's other caregivers, then there's IEP, there's schools, there's camps, programs. Specifically talking about the school relationship here, but knowing your daughter needed more than what was being offered currently by the school, how did you kind of navigate through that process?
Honestly, I felt like like a wave after wave almost. Okay, I got the diagnosis. That's a good thing. Now I understand something. But then I got my hopes up, which was great. There are going to be people who can also support me, who's this is their profession. So, um, and then going into the IEP meeting, I think I'm laughing because I was mildly traumatized when I think back about it. Um, but walking in and it's the weirdest room to be in because it's 8 to 10 people around a table and just you or me. Hi. Like what do I do? Just it was just so overwhelming. Um, because the IEP process, it's so weird. It's like the unless you've ever gone through it yourself or have a family member, you really don't have no clue. It's the weirdest, most obscure trust fall that always like leaves you right on your face anyway.
Right.
And for me, that first meeting was, wow, everyone has something negative to say. There's not one positive thing about my child. So she's a problem to you all, and you want to put her in a different classroom. And how do we back this up, and why? Why? And that was a really tough meeting. I remember going to the car and like literally, and I think it was that sort of like weirdness of got my hopes up to go to someone who could diagnose my student, my beautiful learner, and and then the diagnosis came back as a slap in the face, and then got my hopes up again going to the school environment with my documentation of, and then that was like a slap in the face. So I was just like, okay, well, what do I do? Do I crash out, or do I learn more, or do I just trust people who are sort of forcing me to trust them because in the IEPs they recommend all the services that can support your student, but unless you sign on it, they can't be implemented. So it's like you're held in this weird hostage, you better agree. And if you don't agree, no service because services can be implemented. However, you can partially agree. You can say, I say yes to this, but I don't say yes to this. And I learned that along the way. But I mean, your question was, what was it like the first time? And that's what it was like. It was somebody picked me up off the ground. Um, I don't know what to do with this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my background is in education and I've attended IEP meetings as like the classroom teacher, generalist teacher. And then I actually went and pursued my master's in special education because I was like, I could feel it in the room as a classroom teacher of this is so inaccessible for families, right? Like that's the main I would say like I was feeling uncomfortable because I could see that the family was uncomfortable in like the situation because we're using terminology and words in the land of education that is not clear for
Yeah.
parents to actually understand what was happening. And
Hmm.
then second to that is like I would do like a little bit of coaching ahead of time for the families that I was going to be at their IEP meeting. And I'd be like, okay, make sure you ask these questions. Make sure that you ask if this is a resource because I think like this would be really great. But I, as the classroom teacher, I can't say anything. Like, I can't say, like, oh, yeah, they should have this sort of accommodation or modification because I don't have like the expertise or the grounds to like request something. But you, as
Yeah.
the parent, you have so much power, but also you you don't have the background information to know what to ask for in the first place, which is
Yes.
why it's also so crazy because it's like it's really like special education director and parent and everyone else is there for support, but then
Mm.
at the same time, like, yeah, you just sign on the line, right? Like,
That's I
oh,
don't.
oh my goodness. Well, I think like that's the importance and the beauty of this conversation today though too is that, it is that kind of the two-sided thing. There's complexities and it shouldn't be this hard for parents to kind of navigate and get support for their kids.
Yeah.
Um I want to talk a little bit about the mindset shift too. So one of the things is like feeling like you have to fight everyone, right? Or, maybe there might be a better way. So what are some of the strategies or lessons that you learned through that process of like how to approach the conversation or how to ask a question even?
I think one day I had this realization of everyone is stupid. And
Yeah.
I meant that in such a literal sense back then. I was like, everybody is stupid.
Oh my
We're all
goodness.
just trying to be less stupid. And I don't want to be stupid anymore, including myself. Like everybody and me, all of us, this is just so stupid. Like Why can't I go home feeling great about the environment that my daughter is in? Why can't I feel exceptionally amazing because she's progressing in schools? And why do I feel like I'm over apologizing for the way in which my daughter shows up in the world? And why is it that I feel like I have to manage everybody just so that they understand that she thinks differently, she talks differently? That's, and I finally was like, we're all just being very stupid here. Like, this is so stupid. We're all being stupid. So someone's got to be smart. And I don't want to be dumb anymore. So I was just like, enough. I'm not making any apologies. I'm just not going to say, if you don't want to vibe with us, we have a different rhythm in this house. If it doesn't work for you, then go find somebody else. And I think that was the energy that helped me as a mother, as a woman, as a researcher, as a leader, in a lot of different areas of how does people pleasing sort of spill over into trying to get the best for our kids. And to me, that was like my, when you're like laying down and all of a sudden it's like a, you know, like you rise up.
Yeah.
That was my like, yes, I'm
This is it.
fabulous. My
Yeah.
daughter's fabulous. We're gonna have a fabulous life. And I think it was just a mindset shift too of I want everything to be fabulous from my morning coffee to down to any meetings that I have and what can be done to make sure that there's a better outcome here. So I guess I started just managing people and managing scenarios and then my own expectations managing too. Like if I show up somewhere, I'm going to bring the energy, I'm going to bring the vibes and the intellect and the expertise. So you all better have some flowers on the table. I need my favorite water present. I just give me some fresh fruit, give me something. And I don't know, I just got more demanding.
Oh my gosh. Well, I love it. Well, okay, so let's take another step back then too and think about these meetings, right? Like the IEP
Yes.
meetings and kind of coming in like the mindset of it could be like your first IEP meeting, this could be your 10th IEP meeting.
Yeah.
What happens when parents show up to meetings and they don't know what questions to ask or how to tell if a document is good? Like in the moment, they're like, okay, you're going to review this. We're going to go through this with you, sign on the line. That's the end of the meeting and we carry on. So in that moment, what are we looking for?
What is the family looking for?
Yeah, as the family, as the parent who's like advocating for your child, what are some of those things on the IEP that they should be looking at, reviewing? How do they know if it's good or not good? What are some things that they should be thinking about?
I think it's just an impossible task. And um honestly, why I have the company that I have. I don't think anybody should have to do that heavy lifting. I think you need to let something do the dirty work. Like why should we have to be so overwhelmed with looking at the documents? But I mean, and until we get to that part, I will say at minimum, if you ever read a line that suggests that the reason why your child can't do X is because of their disability, that right there, you just stop. Just stop. If it's a student all written in the document and not the name of your child, stop there too. If you don't understand what is being recommended and the language is direct or indirect services, the difference, that's what they're saying in terms of group or individual services, you can stop and ask. Just stop and clarify and know that the school very much wants you to sign. So there's nothing you can like. So ask as many questions as you need to ask. If you have to say, I don't understand what's in this document, and so somebody really needs to break this down. I also found that it was helpful for me to recognize that the educators did mean well. It just is the way that they're used to doing things. And so for me, I used to say, I don't want to hear about everything that's wrong. I know everything that's wrong. Okay. Like, tell me what you're going to do to be able to move the needle. That's all I want to hear. I don't want to have one, two, and three, and four meetings. Time is money. Time is precious. So I made everybody shift the way in which they would present information. I'm going to talk about what are you proposing first. Then you can tell me your reasoning why. But tell me, what are you proposing? Let's get down to it. So I would say if a person does not understand what is being offered, what is being proposed, or interesting justifications as to why, 9 times out of 10, you're right. So you can always ask, what does this actually mean? What does this mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was one of the big things that came up when I was a classroom teacher too is, we have to live and breathe the IEP when it comes into practice in the classroom. And so oftentimes too, like we're not part of that conversation until we've already taught the child for an entire year, and then it's like preparing the IEP for the next year for the next teacher, and that teacher oftentimes isn't in the room when the new IEP is being established. And so I remember at the beginning of the school years we would get like an IEP snapshot, and it's like, okay, they get extra time for this, or there's a different placement for assessments. It's like, okay, those are the things that I'm thinking of, but any nuance that is not documented on the IEP does not get communicated over to the teacher. And so anything that's like literally, I would say like be specific. Like ask like what is the alternate testing placement? If that's something that they worked out that works really well for them that year, document where that is because I don't know as the incoming teacher, right? And
Mhm.
so as specific as you can possibly be is also super helpful. And I know that the school district will put vague language just because they can. But if it is something that is working for your kid, then that jumps forward so many steps when it comes to the next school year and implementation.
Yeah.
So I'll say that from my perspective, at least as the educator side, is like the more details you can give me, the better, because then I feel like I don't have to try as many things to get us back to where we were at the end of the
That's a
last.
really good point too. I mean, considering the fact of students with IEPs that are highly mobile and just move around all the time or whichever, I think a lot of people don't really consider that this is not a one and done document. It's in some cases evergreen and will follow you around. And that is a good point. Like I want this plan to be something that anybody can pick up and move forward on, and it's very clear and it's consistent and concise. um,
Yes.
I always pound over my daughter's head: be clear, concise, and consistent. The three C's, okay? It'll take you everywhere. So, that's I love that you said that. Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, it's helpful. Like I mean, at least for me as a classroom teacher, I always want to do what's best. And sometimes the parents don't think about the conversation that they had in May or June and then how that translate to classroom in like August, September time. There's a
Yeah.
whole summer. We've lived through some time with our kids. So anything that is helpful as far as the details are super helpful to document too, and at least in my perspective and in my opinion. But and another thing that we kind of talked about a little bit was like this idea of transparency and or lack of transparency, especially when it comes to like the vocabulary and things.
Mhm.
And how if there's a lack of transparency in the IEP process, it can lead to like mistrust, right? So how do we start to fix that? Or like what are ways that we as a parent could then advocate for more transparency? I know you talked about a little bit of how you kind of reframed the IEP meeting too, of how they talked about, your daughter, but any other strategies or things that you utilized in order to combat that?
I mean, I don't want to just pub my app, but literally my app, because my thing is, mm, sometimes you need something else to do the talking for you. Sometimes you do.
Mhm.
And the way in which my app is designed, it reviews the language first. And if it's too lexically dense, if it flags for deficit based framing, if it flags for too many negative positioning, those things are called out first. And then it's like, okay, let's just take a minute. I understand probably why I'm feeling dazed, confused, and upset, because this product that has nothing to do with me or the school environment just laid out what I've known to be experiencing without actually having a name for it. That's number one. And the point that I'm trying to make along with that is nobody names how parents are feeling. And then expects most parents to push back those very real feelings that are based in data, not just based off of osmosis, to then sit there like you have no feelings, hear all the negative stuff, and then go, great, guys. Great. This is wonderful. Like it's an impossible position to be in because as a parent, you know what your student and your child is capable of. Like you come on now. Our kids are not always the best. Like that's the whole point. They're running up and down doing whatever they do. We know that, but should those moments categorize a student as being a bad student or having like a bad moment, or is it even bad I had this one time my daughter went through a full cussing phase for like a week. I don't know what it was, but every other word had to be a cuss word.
Oh my goodness.
Every word, every other word.
Oh my God.
But that was in her IEP. There were some person was walking around counting how many times she said a cuss word and then put it in the IEP document. And then of course, they didn't know who they were messing with when they would do that, because why would you do that? Like this person is aggressive because they say these words and all. There's some language is so key. And so it I feel like I'm going around in circles a little bit because people don't understand the power of words and the power of language and what it can mean. It can be so distractive, disruptive, or it can be collaborative. So it's like choose either or. Um, so that's what I would literally say. Get somebody to do the dirty work for you who's going to review it and push it out there, because you need to focus on what you need to focus on, which is not this stinky plan. You got kids to raise and your own life to live. And I think that is also missing from that. There's just too much pressure for a family to have to understand a 30 to 40, 50-page document.
Yeah. And then sit there and have it basically regurgitated to you in an hour-long meeting, right? And then hearing it in addition to reading it. You know, one of the things that you brought up is like having someone do the dirty work for you. And so I want to kind of tap into this too, because, family experience or generational trauma or like your own past schooling experience, like if you were a child and you had an IEP, or maybe there's some like stigma from grandparents onto the grandchild, how does that affect the way that we do or don't advocate for our kids?
I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot there. There's so much there, because if English is not your first language, or you come from a cultural background where it's not encouraged to talk about a learning difference or disability or mental wellness or any of that, because it's so stigmatized, there's a lacking of a support system. So that's the hardest thing. That is the hardest thing. And it's so real and it's very true. There's nothing else I could say about that except that, processes that have built in cultural sensitivity help with those things, because you shouldn't have to, like, if a grandparent has custody of their child for whatever reason, and then there's this age difference and they're raised in a different type of environment and understanding where we don't really talk about these things, but I got this, my grandbaby that I have to help now. There's just a lot of nuance and layers to what family is and how to properly support family too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to come back to like the tool, like you mentioned your company as well, and the tool that you have created for parents and or families, I guess just in general. What way does that also then kind of mitigate some of those barriers, right? Because it seems like it would be like a neutral third party where it's like nobody's having to like hire an advocate quite yet, or like maybe you could ask these questions or it'll give you feedback. Tell us a little bit more about like what it actually does for the family unit.
Yeah. So, um, Expert IEP is my baby that was born out of my frustration with my daughter, and has gone through a lot of different changes over the years to really nail down the experience for families, which is Number one, we need to understand what the document is saying. And so that's the first step. The second step is it's an invitation to collaborate where the parents can share their strengths, their ideas of what they would like their student to work on, or ways that they believe their child can be beyond the K through 12 setting. And that has been so pivotal to ask and then to name because while you're managing this year and this day to day, sometimes the future really gets lost. And if it's only mandated to really look into in terms of transitionary support when kiddos are in high school or getting ready to go to high school, why can't we think about that a little bit early? Because as far as I'm concerned, elementary students, you get to what do you want to be when you grow up? You know, they're invited to explore and to dream big, but students on IEPs aren't. It's so do this and pass this and oh don't do that but do this again and so my understanding is what is that emotional lift for a family for their kiddos. So the platform asks those very three key questions, and then we use recommendation modeling and generative AI. So it recommends a better and reimagined plan that doesn't pull from anywhere. It starts with what the IEP is recommending, then folds in what the family expectations are to have a better, more holistic plan. That optimized plan then gets sent to case managers that the family or whoever the family wants to send it to. And from there, it gets implemented in the classroom. We've measured to see how fast and often it's implemented. And they get implemented 30% faster in the school environment. So it's pretty doggone dope. I mean, the first thing that we say is like the notes for the team, the vision for the student, what needs to change in this IEP document. It's to XYZ. Let's do this now. I bet you
Mhm.
hadn't thought about this. And in some cases, it saves the school money, a lot of money. But in most cases, it helps families to get very, very clear on what is being proposed, whether or not this is a good plan, and to feel confident when they drop their babies off at school, knowing and having some clarity about what is happening and the preferred or the recommended goal on the school sites.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I think like the big thing that's jumping out to me right now too is like this time savings, right? And the effort savings, because from the school side, they typically like propose accommodations or modifications, but it's like we don't know for sure if it'll work. We're gonna just try it for like the next school year, right? And then we report back. Even though we try to make like the most informed decisions with the data that we have, a lot of
Mhm.
the times it's like, okay, this is the best guess, or like based on this specific data measure, this is like the traditional, solution for that resolution.
Yes.
um and so when your point about like 30% quicker implementation, it's like, man, you're learning so much quicker. Like I remember as a first grade teacher, I had a student, um and he had like he didn't have a behavior plan, which is called like a 504 plan, which is typically for like behavioral things. He didn't have an IEP or anything when he came to me. And one of the things that I was requesting was a functional behavior analysis as a classroom teacher. This is what I was requesting for him
Wow.
because he needed additional services. And it took until they came to do the assessment the last week of May and school got out the second week of June. So that entire year, I was
Wow.
testing things and documenting things in the classroom to help the student. And I was like, this needs to be formalized though, so that the next year the teacher would then be able to have a plan. Okay, like great. They tried this last year, this didn't work. We're going to move forward. And it sounds like the tool that you've created would help you be able to test too and like have smarter recommendations for um the practical side of implementation within the classroom, because ultimately that's what it comes down to is this actually working for the child? Are they meeting their goals? That's If they're not meeting their goals, then the school is failing.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
so this seems like a great catch-all too for parents to be able to see, and then also for schools to be held accountable to what's working and what's not working a little bit quicker.
Hmm.
um but okay, so I know I get like I nerd out on the teacher side of things because it is such a passion, and like that is the main reason why I left the classroom, honestly, was because of the things that were hidden behind the scenes within the school district, the politics, the complexities where it's like why can't I invite this family into my classroom for this event? Why can't I give them a call and tell them about this thing that's going to affect their child in 2 weeks? Because I know that their child has anxiety and it's going to be something that they should probably start front loading. Like, why am I in trouble as the classroom teacher for trying to help these families like better connect with their kids and be supportive of that? And so that's why I did what I did with dailies and now with Launch Family, which is all about families as well. Can't keep the kids away from me. I've got 6 of my own, and it's like a mama bear all around. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm just so excited through this conversation too, and what a great, incredible resource. So, I want to come back to like this idea of the schools too, where we talked about like the parent is navigating these emotions and like this language and the resources that are available now through like platforms like yours.
Mhm.
And also give a little bit of airtime to the fact that like we recognize that schools are under this constant pressure, the educators, the team, like the caseloads are growing probably more now than even before COVID.
Yeah.
How can parents maybe reposition things or approach educators more with like empathy and also maintaining those expectations?
I think most families should learn how a team works. And I don't say that just to, be coy or whatever, but the strength of the team is the strength of the team. And every person has a position to play. Um, my daughter did a lot of sports, even though she was very, couldn't really walk for a while. Um, but I didn't care. Like, you're going to do every sport activity. And guess what? You're not coming home with any participatory trophy. We don't do that in this house. Some families don't agree with that. And I don't care. Like, my daughter's a winner. She's going to know what it's like to win. And you can only know what it's like to win after you've got the mud thrown in your face a few times. Um, and so through sports and through working on that, I mean, my daughter, she's incredible. She does Brazilian jiu-jitsu. She's really kicking butt in like real life now. So she's I love her. I love her. I love her. And she just graduated from high school and like, oh my God, all of the feels. And but the point of me bringing up a team is the team is the only as strongest as the weakest player on the team. And 9 times out of 10, the families are the weakest player on the team. And it's hard to hear and it's hard to kind of understand what that means. But you are the weaker player on the team because the home based team at the school environment has had opportunities to speak as a group. They've had opportunities to share information. They have opportunities to learn from each other and to observe your child, the student. So then when you come in on an IEP meeting after the team has already gone to practice, they've huddled, come up with a playbook, right? And you don't even get to really see it or interpret it, or maybe they sent it to you a couple of days before, you hadn't had time to read it, or you don't quite understand. You are the weakest person on the team. And that is something, and then it's not a point of importance. That's the weakest person because you're not tapped in. There's no flow. There's no collaborative spirit happening here. It just is what it is. So, and it's a weird dynamic because you are the most important person there, but you are also the weakest at the same time. So it is disorienting to say the least. And that should be named too. And so when I think about like the teams in the school environment and the things that they have to consider and understand too, if the families understand that they're coming in as the most important, but weakest person on the team, then they can have some understanding of what's already been talked about, what's been agreed upon potentially. Maybe they have cases, unfortunately, of predetermination where things have been predetermined prior to you walking into that room. And so the feelings that you're feeling in that moment is, damn, I'm not a part of the conversation that's happening behind closed doors. But we're talking about my kid. And if it wasn't for me, we wouldn't be here, right? So it's like that's the mind frame that you've got to understand. That's number one. How do you increase from being the weakest person on the team? You ask questions, you get curious, you try to understand what is being proposed and why, and you ask them, how many students do you have? to support. Hey, that should help you to understand too that it's not just your student that they're working through the IEPs, it's a lot more kids. And special education has never been funded the way that it was meant to be funded to actually really truly support students. So it is an impossible position to be in for a lot of well-meaning educators. That is very, very true. And so everybody is trying to come up with better goals, good goals. How do they communicate that to the most important person, who happens to be the weakest person in the room on that day? It is a very challenging period to be in. So I think there's an understanding. Like, y'all are the stronger ones, but you're also the lessons. You're not as important. Because if I make 2 phone calls and escalate this, no one's going to be happy. So anyways, what I would say is, the school environment can do what they can do. You have to understand whether or not the school is well resourced or not. Or maybe the school also shares a psychologist and that psychologist is visiting other different school sites. And so if you understand who are there to support you and who are there behind the scenes, then you can develop a plan with them that makes sense, that continues to move around, regardless of who's in that position. And so that your student is always going to get the best support. And then the educators will know that, okay, this family is trying to understand and we're trying to work together, and they're not trying to come and hit me over the head and make something happen. Um, and in the case that I'm seeing, by prioritizing families, going direct to families on our first couple of years with Expert IEP, we're now going into schools. But that has been a wonderful thing to experience because the schools are the ones that are saying we need to restore the parent school partnership. And we recognize that there's got to be a better way that we can approach this because this is not an individual issue, it's a systems issue, and we need better systems. So that's what I would say. Like, if you were ever feeling like that joker just said this about my kid and blah, 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 like, yeah, they did. And it sucked. And I'm so sorry. But it's a system thing. It's not really an individual thing. And that's what I would say too, because that's certainly what has helped me, what's helped a couple of thousand families that I've been able to help. Of if you switch your mind frame just a little bit, understand that this year is but a drop in the life cycle of the well-lived life that your kiddo is going to have. Let's just breathe a little bit easier. Let's go into this year knowing that budgets are strapped, people are all afraid of knowing, is this a good plan? Am I going to get sued this year? Am I going to even have the same classroom? And I've seen now both sides of it, by design and accidentally on purpose, I should say.
Yeah, I love that you bring up like the both sides too, because it is like I completely agree and concur. Like, it is a systems issue from the school, at least from my experience as a teacher. But then there are tools and resources out there for parents to feel more equipped as they come into the meeting and make sure that they're not, like, obviously they can't be like in the school all day long with their child to understand like the nuance of when these behaviors are happening, or, the best kind of recommendation with the resources that are available. But at the same time, there's tools out there to better help them feel equipped going into the meeting.
Yeah.
And definitely ask for the IEP ahead of time. Like, I feel like that's another thing too, where sometimes it's just like, oh yeah, I need to send, I know that this was something that was brought up in the school, was like
Mhm.
the special education director, she would like forget to send it. And then she would ask me to forward it through like our class messenger system, like Class Dojo or something like that.
Oh
And
my
it's
God.
like, oh my goodness. Well, we should definitely be sending the IEP ahead of time. So if you don't get it ahead of the meeting, also ask,
Right.
because they're supposed to. So, that's just another great, like, little trigger point of like, okay, nobody's perfect, but also that you should have access to this to review.
Or you just get my platform because that's ridiculous. Like, everybody, who's going to remember to send out 40 documents a day or whatever if necessary? Like, those things should be triggered. There should be an alert system that says meeting coming up, send it, and it's on auto. Like, rinse and repeat. Let's have systems that make it easier for people to do their jobs. Um, anyways, I don't want to.
We could go at lengths talking about the school systems piece. Like, yeah, no, I mean, I get it. We're living in like the 70s, 80s ish time era of like technology in the schools too. Like the systems part of that has not been updated in a lot of schools and districts. So, I'm really excited to see this, everything that you're doing still kind of come into fruition within the school side too. But before we wrap up, we do have a couple questions that were written in by families to our AI family assistant, Emmy,
Okay.
which helps families ask smarter questions and kind of gives them some of that that information just in general too. Like, does my 7-year-old have ADHD? Like, what does the process look like for even getting that diagnosis? Like, can kind of walk them through some of these earlier steps. So would love to get your take on a couple of these questions, both as a mom and as a business owner with your platform. So the first question is, I got my child's IEP and I have no idea if it's good. What should I look for? So is there like a checklist that you have for clarity or quality? And you can speak to about what you do with your work too.
Oh man. Yes, there is a checklist. And I would say the IEPs that do generally well are the ones that do have the IEP at a glance so that you can understand what is being proposed without going through all of everything. That's number one. Number two is the correct diagnosis there. And if your student has different intersecting diagnoses, are they all written and are they in proper form? Because sometimes there you have the primary and secondary diagnosis. And what I've seen so far are students who are on the spectrum. That will be a secondary diagnosis, but the primary is emotional disturbance. And I'm not sure why it's like that, but that is the case with a lot of students of color that I'm seeing too. So I would say pay attention to what's written actually on the diagnosis because that informs the types of supports, services, and accommodations that you will get. I would also look into knowing the age of the student, right? And the grade of the student. So where is there a gap? And that's when present level performance comes in. So if your student is reading at a third grade level, but they're in the sixth grade, and you think that your kids have the capacity to do and to be more and to how to raise that bar, then I'd want to see if there's a way to bridge that. Are people thinking about bridging those gaps for the support side? I would also look to see if there's too many prescribed behavioral support because what I've found is that students have these large behaviors because they're not able to understand what is being asked of them as it relates to the curriculum. I would also say that if you have an IEP where it has nothing to do with academics, then it's impossible to measure someone's report card and the report card of the IEP. That is insane. So that is something else that I would say. I would also say if you ever see instances in which the diagnosis of your child is taking more of an important role in the document. So, for example, student has other health and other health impairment, and will not be able to do X. Those declarative statements, oh, they got to go as well. And then, of course, at minimum, who are the people on the team? Are they identified in the document? Do you know what and how long the services are being offered to you? Um, and please make sure that the name of your child is on the document too. So I think that's a
Spelled
little.
correctly. Oh my
Huh?
goodness. And spelled correctly too. Like that was one of the things that I would always catch too well, not always, but occasionally catch like a misspelling or like a typo or something. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
oh my goodness. Well, the next question is, I want to speak up in the meeting, but I don't want to offend anyone. How do I advocate without conflict?
There is an assumption in that question. The
Mm,
assumption is that speaking up will lead to conflict. And
Mm,
I would say get rid of that assumption first. There's a quiz that I have on the website where family can understand how do they learn and how do they prefer to be engaged on the IEP meeting. So it's like a personality quiz, but like an IEP personality quiz.
love
It sounds so like cringe, but it's so helpful to know like who are you as a parent. Um and so anyways, I would say that. Now in terms of and understanding that you do have some types of assumptions going on, you got to fix that first because until you fix that, you're not going to be able to do what you need to do for your kids. Um, but to answer the question more, head on, I would say, um, I'm interested in hearing what you will have to say about X. And usually, if you leave with curiosity about whatever your concern is, instead of naming the concern and like, you know, I'm interested in hearing why was this written this way, or you know, I'm curious. More collaborative language like that is usually non-confrontational. You can't do anything though about how someone perceives you and receives you. So sometimes to be straightforward is just the best thing because at the end of the day, your kid's not in that room yet and they need you. So who you know
Yeah.
but non-confrontational, I would like to know what actually is the question, like I don't understand this and this, blah, blah, blah. For me, I would say like, this doesn't feel right. We'll make it feel right. I can't name the thing, but I'm seeing the thing or something. And the other thing, what I'm trying to get at as well is sometimes being vague is very helpful in those meetings too. If you don't want to immediately say how you're feeling about something too, or you could just leave it on the table and let someone else fill in the gaps because that takes the onus off of you. You shouldn't internalize anything too. So I feel like I'm speaking all around it, but the point is don't assume because you speak up that will directly lead to conflict. That is not your job right now. It's not in your job description as an advocate and as parent, okay? The second thing is invite collaboration and invite more curious types of framing to questions. um, would be very, very helpful. And if that doesn't work, then be extraordinarily vague and point it out and then be quiet and let them fill up the room.
I love those practical strategies too, because I'm envisioning like what that does to like the full dynamic, right? Of um oftentimes too the things that I experienced in the IEP meetings is kind of like the sage on the stage, right? Where like there's one person who's leading the meeting, they're the one who's talking, they'll only call on people at specific times. But being able to have more of that collaborative nature and like jumping in. Like if it's not your turn, it's okay to speak up, and don't feel like you have to stay within the realm of how they operate their IEP meetings just for the sake of that process that they have in place.
Oh,
Um,
you know what? I would say parents to review Robert's rules of order and use that language in a meeting as a point, whatever. Because sometimes we do need that vocabulary too, to your point as well. But I mean, so what if there's conflict? And what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Let's just be so for real. What's going to happen?
yeah. No, I mean, I'm fully supportive of that too. I think that that's great practical advice too, like the way that you broke it down so easily for parents. I mean, it's easier to say than maybe to do, and when you have all of the feelings that you're processing in those meetings, but
Mhm.
also it takes practice. So maybe do like a little mock IEP at home or invite a neighbor over or something too, and just talk through what you could say or what you could ask. Bring notes to the meeting would be another thing. If you need to have like those phrases written down, until you internalize could be another option. But the last question we have is I feel like I'm failing my kid because I don't understand the process. I think this kind of is based a little bit maybe on, like the processes that we talked about within the school district or like the formal sort of procedures, right? So what's your advice for parents kind of carrying those feelings of like self doubt?
Get comfortable with them. Get comfortable with it and learn to love it. That's what I would say. If you ever doubting, that should be a signal to you that you were close to figuring it out or and will figure it out. Like, I think doubt is used in ways that, it's like negative sometimes, but doubt is also a revealer. Like, I'm doubting something like I doubt that I'm, whatever. In this case, in the IEP that I'm failing um my kid because I don't know. Great. Great. Imagine if you felt like you were just nailing it and then you were missing something, Like, that's a great feeling. I would say love that freaking feeling and let it be your guide to then ask more questions until you get the clarity that you need. Because doubt is just telling you there's something you're unclear about. You don't know if there's another question. Have I asked all the questions? Is it something that's better? And in fact, I would say that, don't own it. Go and talk to the people who are in those seats every day and say, is there something else I could be asking? Is there something else that we can be doing? I'm thinking about going and getting an advocate because I don't understand this. That doubt will lead you to get a lot of clarity and a lot of clarity fast. It's telling you something. So, you're not lacking anything. You're not failing. You are a parent who cares. And that's a good damn thing.
Amen. Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, any for the parents that are listening in today and are inspired or kind of reflecting on the conversation that we've had, any lasting thoughts or pieces of wisdom that they can carry with them into their day and their life?
I would say I haven't met a family who's not super dope with having a child that has a learning difference or disclosed disability. Like, they're the most chill, roll with the punches, agile people, down to earth, because by design, our lives need to be that way. We've got neurodiverse kids. You have don't know, someone might stand and you're joining in and catching a vibe and it's all good. I just feel like that should be named too. There's so many people that would just assume that families are the loudest in the squeaky wheel because they have a student with a learning difference, but it's by design ostracizing and very much it's like a subculture almost, And I would just say, like, you guys are great. Don't let anybody tell you that you don't belong at the table or that your kids are too loud or you're whatever, Like, you're living such a well lived life that a lot of people don't have the opportunity to witness. They don't have the opportunity to see your child overcome shit that would be so difficult for the most, for anybody. You know what I mean? Like, you mean to tell me that, like, yes, let's give a round of applause for everything that's possible for our students because they're going to surprise us in the most annoying yet amazing way. And I would just say, like, this is such a ride, And when I think about the day my daughter got diagnosed as a single mother and trying to work that through to my daughter, like, she talks too much, like we argue, we do, she's a teenager. That within itself is absolutely beautiful because who would have thought that would have been possible when I think about the diagnosis in general. And so I'm talking as a mother, I'm talking as, someone that was stubborn and clung to hope. And my daughter, like, graduated and is college bound. Like, you can't tell me nothing. You know what I mean? So the point that I'm saying is, any family who's listening, okay, don't internalize what any of these jokers have to say to you. They don't know what your life is like behind closed doors, what you're praying for, what you're believing for, whatever those things are. Don't take that to heart because you are doing a wonderful job. If you have doubts, good. If you are fearful of something, excellent. Like, that lets you know that there's still room for improvement and you will figure it out.
Oh my gosh. Incredibly powerful. Oh my goodness. I'm like welling up with tears too, just hearing, you reflect on your journey with your daughter because it is so
If
powerful.
you cry, I'm going to cry. And let's go.
Trying, I'm holding it in. I don't know if you can tell, but I am holding it in. So I just want to thank you so much, honestly, for sharing like the true, honest kind of conversation and look at the parenting and how to navigate through these processes with your kids and the deep care that you have for families across the board, right? Like, I feel like that's how we initially connected is we just want to help other parents feel like they can, do so much more for their kids or, if they have that piece of doubt, okay, well, what's the action you can take that's connected with that? So,
Yeah.
you reminded us that empowering parents aren't just helpful, but they're also like incredibly necessary parts and pieces of this puzzle of life. To our listeners listening in, if you're navigating special education, IEPs, or feel like you're just being left out of the decisions about your child, know that you're not alone. There's other parents that are out here navigating this too. And be sure to check the show notes for all of the resources from Antoinette, including her coaching support, upcoming programs, all of the links to figure out your personality on how you can approach those meetings. And honestly, remember that your questions are valid, your voice matters, and your child deserves an advocate. Until next time, we're here with you.